Hey everyone, I'm here with Shannon Kiser. Shannon is the Senior Director of Fresh Expressions North America and also the author of Opening Space, A Vision for Fresh Expressions of Church and Creative Mission. Hi Shannon, how you doing?
Hey, Marcus. Thrilled to be with you today.
Yes, and we get to do our little introduction one more time because I did not correctly hit record 10 minutes ago. So I'm glad I get to hear all of this one more time, and all of our listeners get to hear it. Well, maybe a second time in a way, because you were on a previous episode of Spiritual Life and Leadership, and I'll just kind of direct everyone towards that episode. That was episode 177, titled "Exploring New Forms of Church," and that was a great conversation about fresh expressions, but also kind of very much about the church that you're serving in right now. So with that in mind, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so I direct this organization that is really trying to resource and equip people, leaders from all denominations across North America to begin to experiment on the mission edges. And so we are helping people imagine and step into dinner churches and missional communities and cafes and parks and on hiking trails among people groups like single parents or special needs families or so it's just a really beautiful opportunity to expand the imagination and the courage and actually the life of disciples. And then in addition to that, I serve a local congregation, and we try to do this in our own life together. So we run a coffee shop, and we do some fresh expressions type ministries and missions in some of the different pockets of our community. I know we talked about that in our last episode, so I won't go into that, but it's the place where I get to live out this posture, and then I am able to learn from those experiences and share those learnings with the wider church.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I love that you are doing the things that you're teaching. You're living it out. You're practicing it in your local congregation. So the book is great, and I want to start with some statistics that you share at the beginning of the book. And these are not new statistics for many of us, but they're important to. Well, they're important. These are from a guy named Ryan Berg, and here are the statistics. First of all, 66% of churches are plateaued or declining. 93 million U.S. adults identify as nones. That's Nones. Nothing in particular, in quotes, nothing in particular is the fastest growing religious group in America. Kind of a funny way of putting it, right? What's your religious group? Nothing in particular, right? And then there is no major denomination where a majority are under 45 years old. So majority are in major denominations are all over 45 years old. So again, these are not surprising statistics for those of us who are in church leadership, ministry leadership. But they're scary, they're frustrating. We don't know what to do with that. And so what would you say, just to get us started, are the implications of these realities for the church and for the world?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Ryan, he's just doing some really great work in the social science space around religion and faith communities. And he himself was a pastor in a local congregation. And that congregation had to close. And so he comes at it from both a visceral place and a place of curiosity, like some sense making of some of the data that's coming in. It's funny, you and I were talking earlier. I'm usually not a statistics person. I'm more of a story person, but I do think statistics tell stories. And one of the stories that we know is happening is that there are churches that are declining and are probably going to close. The statistics on, how many churches are closing a week or a year are also startling. So that's the part that can be scary or hard to feel good about.
Sure,
but on the other side of that, and I talk about this in the book, there's tons of spiritual curiosity in the culture around us. The church has a often kind of there's a sense of like, man, the church is people are standoffish about church, right? But they are spiritually curious. And I think what that tells us as church is we have got to really rethink some of the ways that we are intersecting in the world, because there's a lot of people who are not going to come to our churches for lots of different reasons, right? They've been wounded, or they see the things in the news, or they have a different politics than they assume Christians are about, or tons of reasons. But we keep trying to do things like to attract them into our churches. And most people don't need more things to do, honestly. So what we got to do then is start shifting and thinking, what would it look like to be in proximity with people, such that we begin to have opportunities to reshape people's imagination and enter into their spiritual curiosity. And I think that's what, for churches that are going to thrive and flourish in the future, that is what's going to have to take place.
I think
it's an invitation, I guess, for us into those statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just talk for another minute or so. Kind of the perspective of the non-church goer. What is it like to be that person? My wife is the director of a church preschool, but not everyone on her staff goes to church. And a few years ago, one of her, they have events in the church sanctuary, but one of her staff members just has a really hard time going even into the sanctuary because that has never been a part of her upbringing. She feels intimidated. She feels scared. So just in your experience, tell us a little bit about what it's like for someone who is not connected to church to visit a church, which is what we want people to do generally, right? That's sort of the standard strategy. Let's get people to visit church. What does it feel like for someone outside the church to visit a church?
I recently, or a couple of years ago, my daughter was going to a university that was not my alma mater, and I had never really gone there. I went to a football game. I didn't know where to park. I didn't know the cheers. I didn't know, it was all unfamiliar. It would have been different, actually, if I had attended that with somebody who is a fan. But my husband and I were just figuring out it as we went, right? And we wanted to be there, and we wanted to learn the liturgy of the football game, right? And so we threw ourselves into it. But had we been nervous or reticent, I'm not sure we would have entered in, because it was all unfamiliar, right? And so I think when we think about people who are outside our churches, I used to serve a church in a neighborhood, and the church building was right there in the neighborhood, lovely lawn, nice sign. I was talking with somebody in the neighborhood, and I was just walking the dog or something, and I was talking to somebody in the neighborhood, and she's like, I wonder what goes on in there. I was one of the pastors of this church. So that's kind of there's a lot of assumptions about what goes on in there, or just a complete disconnect. And what we tend to do is we want to invite people in to do things our way, and a routine that's familiar to us, where they don't have those relationships. We run into our worship services and want to go check in with our friends, and we have all these relationships, and we kind of, know the routine, and it's sort of internalized in our life. And that's not the case for many people who are many steps away
Yeah.
from experiencing what happens in a local congregation.
Right.
Uh, so so there's large barriers
Yeah.
for people to get over to even come in our churches. And
Yeah.
what Fresh Expressions tries to do then is flip it and say, well, what would it look like for you to go where they are?
Yeah. So you're saying, do we need, excuse me, do we need good signage and parking lot attendance? Is that the obstacle? Is that the hurdle, or is there something more?
Well, I mean, there's a lot more.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, I'll drive by and there's a local church. I'm not a part of it, and there's a big sign of what they're doing. I never once thought, oh, I should go to their thing.
Right. Right.
It's like thinking that people are going to wander into my home for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to do it, even if I have a little welcome sign on my front door, because they know it's my home, but it's not their home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you think about the social spaces that Ray Oldenburg talks about, first spaces, second spaces, third spaces. First spaces being where you spend most of your time at home. Second spaces where you spend a lot of your time, work or school. And third spaces, natural gathering spaces. Yeah. Well, church people think of church as oh, well, this is a third space. Anybody can come here. It's like a natural gathering space. It's open for anybody. Welcome. We're a welcoming congregation.
Yeah.
But people outside of the church or who are not church shoppers, they think of it as first space. They think of it as your home.
Yeah. So then tell us about what a fresh expression is. Why do we need, just define what a fresh expression is, and why do we need fresh expressions of the church?
Well, fresh expression is simply a way to talk about new forms of Christian community that are contextually shaped for the culture in which they emerge. And the reason they're called fresh expressions, which kind of sounds like a candle or a salad mix, the reason they're called fresh expressions is in the UK, who are 20 years ahead of us in some of these statistics, right? And so we were learning from what was happening in the UK, and what they began to discover is there were these new kinds of Christian communities that were forming in unexpected places and spaces. And at the same time that attendance in some of the local parishes and those beautiful cathedrals was trending, precipitously down. There were some sold out disciples who were forming these missional communities in the club culture and in skate parks and in or where a local parish had shifted their facility to become like an indoor play area, and around pizza parties and around surfing, which I know is part of the culture where you are, right? And they saw these things happening, and they're like, "What in the world is going on? The Spirit seems to be doing something." And they were trying to, the Church of England, which doesn't get any more traditional than that, right? Began to just pay attention what's happening on the edges. And they wanted to lift it up, and they recognized, like, let's be, how do we make space for this? How do we legitimize it? How do we begin to value it with institutionally? And they went back to the declarations of assent that are part of the liturgy with a priest, and they discovered that one of the declarations of assent was, "We will proclaim the gospel afresh in every generation." And so that's why it's called fresh expressions, right? But simply what we're talking about is okay, here's the statistics. You can continue to try to attract people into your congregation. And we hope you will do good worship and good ministry and robust Bible studies that will, because there are some people who are resonating with that and are coming to look for that. And honestly, they're going to be the ones who are the disciples who go out into the mission edges and into their everyday lives to live this out, right?
Yeah.
So in no way do we discount the beauty and importance of that. But at the same time, we have to be thinking about how do we enter into the culture and into these spaces and begin to imagine and partner with God to see what could emerge in these spaces where a new form of Christian community could form here. And it's probably its rhythms, its liturgy is probably going to look different than the than the inherited church, than the more traditional Sunday morning gathered experience.
Right.
But it can become a really faithful expression of what church is. And for many people who participate there, who come to faith there, you will start hearing them talk about, well, this is my church. And you're like,
cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll bridge back to the inherited church, and sometimes they won't. And but there's something beautiful that can happen in these everyday spaces.
Yeah. That question of whether or not they bridge back to the inherited church, I think is always, well, it seems to me that one of the hard, or maybe even one of the hardest things for people in the inherited church, including the pastor, and the staff and the elders, because normally we think, how do we get people to come to our Sunday morning services, right? And we want to grow our attendance here. One of the things you talk about is a blended ecology, which maybe helps us to think about bringing it all together. So talk about what you mean by a blended ecology.
Well, in the book, I talk a little bit. The best way it feels like to talk about this that people can understand. It's basically, how do you diversify so that you're not just connecting with people in one form, right? And so in the book, I talk about a diversified portfolio. No financial advisor would tell you to put all your stocks in one company.
Right.
I mean, all your investments in one stock in one company. But they talk about a diversified portfolio, right? And it's because when you everything doesn't rise and fall over this one thing, right? And what we tend to do for years and years, and it worked during Christendom, was like you wrap everything around the Sunday morning gathering, right? And so to think about a blended ecology of we do have our Sunday morning kind of traditional. I don't want to get into worship wars. I'm not talking about traditional versus contemporary. I'm talking about just sort of like church gatherings as we know it on Sunday morning. We do some good, ministries. There's some particular missions, but then how do we also think about forming or deepening community and exploring discipleship and sort of some of the more natural rhythms of the life of our community, our larger community, not just our church community. And so when we're doing both of those together, you create the opportunity to be a more robust, fruitful organization. Now, to your point, what people are like, but like if we expend our energy out there, how is it going to benefit us? How is it going to grow our budget? How is it going to grow our attendance? And And I would say, well, how is that posture working out for you now?
Yeah, right.
Right? Like if what I have discovered over time is, first of all, the beauty of this is you don't have to ask your congregation to give up everything they love that they're already doing for the sake of attracting young families or whatever it
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
you can try some small, simple things on the edges. Where there's some natural connections or where you're already doing mission projects and they could become missional communities, right? And as you do that, actually, those who are engaging in that, they're like, they're on, they have a front row seat to seeing the gospel being transmitted in ways that people are experiencing Jesus as good news. And that is life-giving.
Yeah.
And so their spiritual temperature rises. Like there's an excitement, not to say this is easy or it's always like lollipops and rainbows, but there's something very life-giving about that. Like you feel like you're making a difference and you're in relationships in a deeper way sometimes than maybe you've ever been in relationships in ministry, right? And so, and lay people can do this. It's not just pastors doing this. So the spiritual temperature rises. And as you tell the stories of what's happening, like in my congregation, we can tell stories of what's happening in the coffee shop. We can tell stories about what's happening with our our lunch ministry with day laborers. We can tell stories of what's happening as we gather with after school families at our local Title I school. Like we can tell stories of what's happening there, and the congregation, as you know it, they begin to feel like they're part of something that is has a real life heartbeat to it. And so it raises the spiritual temperature of your congregation. Now, there's not like a one-to-one, like you're going to get all these people to come to your church. But when you have a church that feels alive, people who are visiting can feel that vibe when they come in, or your congregation members might feel more like they can invite their friends and neighbors because they feel like there's something good, something of earthly good happening in their congregation, and they would be more likely to take an invitational posture. So I think those things all work together. And at the end of the day, Jesus says, hey, if you focus on your own self, like it's not about being self-centered, it's about giving your life away. And as we do this, as we start being a life-giving entity, instead of worrying about what's in it for us, what we know, as we give, we receive. Like it loops, the life of that loops back to us.
There's a formative, I think, component for those of us in leadership as well. Like you're saying, seeing these new ways of being church, fresh expressions of being church, open-handedly rather than tight-fistedly. I hold it open to whatever God wants to do, and no expectations of my ego being expanded because of what is happening there, right? And so anyway, it's a new posture for many of us, maybe, because we feel good when people show up on Sunday mornings, right? It makes me feel good when we had a big Sunday today, but that's not it seems to me, the end goal of a fresh expression of the church. So anyway, so there's that formative component.
And I wonder if it's I wonder if our churches could flourish more if we began to imagine, hey, we want to be a fruitful congregation, and not just evidence a notch up on our membership rolls.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, what would it look like for us to be a fruitful congregation? And I've seen some
Yeah.
congregations who are trying to play with, well, how would we measure that, and what would that look like?
Yeah.
And beginning to tell the stories and invite the postures and behaviors of their congregation
Yeah.
that would more reflect being fruitful
Yes.
rather than have attenders,
Yeah. I love that.
right?
Yeah. That's great. I love that because, I mean, we are trapped in this mentality that the only measure of success is how many people show up to stuff, right? Or how much money is in the bank or given on a
Mm-hmm.
particular occasion. So that's in a way an internal sort of transformation that is ongoing for all of us. But okay, so you've got a church now who says, yes, we need to lean into some new ways of being the church, and we see this need, or we've even got some activity in this part of the neighborhood, or whatever it is. Help us understand, like, what's the process? What does it look like to begin to do a new kind of a thing as a church?
I think there's two ways to think about this. But like, are there congregation wide initiatives that you might want to think about, like dinner church, or
Uh-huh.
do you want to identify some particular opportunities or some particularly uh, relationally wired people
Yeah.
who might have a passion or some natural connections? That would be a great
Mm.
starting place for a fresh expression. Um, uh, for example, that I was just talking with a leader yesterday. Their church, for whatever reason, years ago had a pet memorial garden
Mm.
built that
Mm.
they've never used.
Mm.
And so fresh expressions always start with listening,
Yeah.
and being attentive to who God is putting on your heart, and where there might be these opportunities, and what we need to learn from people who are in our communities about what their hopes
Mm-hmm.
and lives. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
is not unfamiliar work to you, listening in the
No.
community. And
No.
so he had done some listening, and he like recognized that, like, anytime he looked out on the main thoroughfare, there were people walking their dogs.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about the unprocessed grief that you see
Mm-hmm.
happening on Facebook when somebody is grieving a pet. Like, there's nowhere to
Mm-hmm.
deal with that, and so you just post it on Facebook so that social media, so that people can share their condolences and
Right.
comfort you. Like, and so he's beginning to put all that together, and he's like, well, we have this asset,
Mm.
and we have, like, the people in our community have pets and love pets, and is that
Yeah.
a natural connecting point to begin to build relationships?
Yeah.
So that would be more like, they have a congregational asset that they are beginning to think
Mm.
about how to engage missionally. And so
Yeah.
when you listen, you begin to consider, well, how do we begin to love and serve and build relationships with pet owners?
Yeah.
Well, we might do a few little, we might have some grief groups that begin to
Yeah.
happen here, or we might begin to gather pet owners for dog happy hour,
Mm.
periodically,
Mhm.
and begin to build relationships. And then
Yeah.
as you do that, you begin to as you out yourself appropriately
Mhm. Mhm.
as a Christian and as a follower of Jesus, and you kind of are thoughtful about signposts of the gospel, just in the way you live your life and the way you interact with people,
Yeah.
and begin to be thoughtful about how do you build community,
Yeah.
or how do you deepen community that already exists.
Yeah.
And as you do that, you begin to pay attention to what would good news feel like here, and
Yeah.
how do we begin to help people experience um, exploring faith
Yeah.
and spiritual curiosity and discipleship ultimately. So
Yeah.
and then as people are stepping into some of those spiritual questions, you
Yeah.
begin to take that deeper, and you can, and a form of church can develop right
Yeah.
there, where there's relationship with God. There's, a quality of care and fellowship happening among the group, where you're, outward facing and living out practices of generosity and compassion and mercy and justice. And you're beginning to see yourselves as, a small part of the body of Christ. Like, that's how a fresh expression forms.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens because you have, a couple of people who are just stepping into something they're naturally interested or passionate about, and they do it with God and they do it with others, and they run that same journey. Just and the congregation just blesses it and says, "We want to hear the stories. We want to support you in whatever way we can. If you need little old ladies to be baking cookies this week, tell us, we'll have a prayer team praying for you." And that the church can be the link of encouragement and support for them to live that out. But the whole congregation may not, start a fresh expression around a love for kayaking, but they're already part of the, that outdoors community. They already know people there. They're already doing it. And so they start beginning to imagine, well, how can I deepen the community I'm already a part of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're touching on the pioneers, permission givers, and supporters that you talk about in the book. These are the three kinds of people that help to make a fresh expression possible. Talk briefly about those three kinds of people.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who are just, they're good news people. They have a winsome faith, or an infectious faith. They are good with people. They're natural connectors. Those tend to be your pioneers. There are some people who are like uber that way, like they're really, that's just how they're wired. There are others who never thought of themselves that way, but actually in certain spaces or realities, they actually can live that out. I'm thinking of a congregation member who was going to visit her mother in a retirement home regularly, and when a pastor sat down and gave her imagination for what would it look like if you actually inhabited that space in a way where you actually were visiting your mom and beginning to build community among the residents there. You're there. They seem drawn to you. And, so she's not like an extroverted, like splashy, let's party kind of, she deeply connects. Right. And so she wouldn't have seen herself as a pioneer, but I do think that there are people who have sort of these natural places of connection or natural passions that, this could, those passions could be sparked into imagination for what this could look like. But, so your pioneers are your frontline kind of connectors that would be trying to, gather and deepen these communities. Supporters are people who believe the church should be doing this, but they don't have some of those natural connectors, or like you don't hang out with them and like, oh my gosh, your faith is infectious. I want what you've got. They're maybe just but they believe in this. And they would do anything from the background to help these kind of frontline goers from these on these teams. They would do all kinds of things in the background to help this flourish. And they can talk it up among their friends. And that's super helpful as well. Permission givers are people who have a role in the system. They can, often these are pastors, but it can also be really respected people in a system. Who can release some resources if you need some funds to, like, I don't know, have a weekly dinner or something, if that's part of the way this is shaping out. They can have the coffee with
Yeah.
and give them the vision for this, and
Yeah.
kind of like offer their permission and a little bit of nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're the ones who can block and tackle when somebody's like, well, I don't know why we're
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So they can use their role to try to
Yeah.
influence the system or cast some vision in the system.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can really unlock some
Yeah.
things. They know how to open some doors in
Yeah.
different areas to legitimize, encourage, resource.
Yeah. I love that. Because not everybody's the same. Not everybody's wired the same way. And sometimes we think, oh, I have to be like that person in order to do ministry or in order to make a difference. And recognizing that, no, we all bring what we have, right? Some of us have
Mm-hmm.
this sort of
Mm-hmm.
extroverted, pioneering energy, and others, we just tell me how it can help, right? And I want to, I'll make dinner for you guys. I'll bring
Yeah.
cookies, whatever it is. So I love that. One more thing. How do you keep? So let's say you've got some kind of a gathering of, dog owner happy hour. Like that was one thing you threw out there. How do you keep that from being just dog owner happy hour? Because I think it could be easy if you're not careful, just to sort of get comfortable and be like, oh, I want to push people too far into
Yes.
spirituality. I don't want it to feel like it's a bait and switch. Now, how do we help something like that become something that is a worshiping community? Essentially, I think that's kind of what you're saying. Refreshers
Yes.
is, yeah.
Yes. And so I think intentionality
Mm-hmm.
is the biggest piece of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, because and some things do start that it's kind of start with a more understanding that this is going to be church. Dinner church, from the front end, there's going to be some spiritual exploration in that.
Yeah.
So I'll say that caveat, and sometimes that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be more organic, right?
Yeah.
And so there's got to be intentionality, because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not intentional about it, it's never going to go past dog happy hour.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can't prescribe from the front end exactly how that's going to unfold. So this is really
Mm-hmm.
going to be a dance with the Holy Spirit, which is why we do a lot of coaching alongside some of these projects through our organization, like just in time, kind of thinking about this intentionality along the way, right? But I would say some principles are, you're going to be, as you're forming relationships,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually, first of all, not hiding who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and what's important to you. And so you're going to have to start from the front end saying, hey, I'm so glad, something like, and this is not a prescription, but something like, there's one pioneer who's like, hey, Jesus loved a good party. And so have a great time. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
And it's just as simple as that. Not like, everybody, we're going to pray now.
Yeah.
But just like appropriately along the way, outing yourself, and having people see a quality and the way you engage in friendship, the way you navigate disagreements or conflict with people, kind of some of the rhythms that you're setting up in the community, and ways that you inhabit some of those spaces are themselves the beginning of discipleship, and the beginning of community formation. That's deeper. You learn to ask really good questions. You learn to probe into spiritual curiosity, and you're almost like apprenticing along the way. Jesus talked about, as you go, make disciples. And so there's an in the going of this community, right? And then there should never be, like, unless there's a clear reason to take this step.
Yeah.
There should never be like, we're happy hour, we're happy hour. Oh, gotcha, we're church.
Right.
But you can be intentional about opt-in opportunities for people
Mm.
to explore faith more deeply.
Mm.
So that's usually going to look like another time or
Okay.
an invitation into, hey, would it be okay if I pray with you? I just like heard
Mm.
some things. Would it be
Yeah.
okay if I pray with you?
Yeah.
We have a prayer group that's going to start gathering on Tuesday nights, or you discover things as you get to know people like, oh,
Yeah.
these are people who are really struggling not only with grief of a pet, but
Yeah.
a search for meaning.
Mm.
You know what? I'm sensing this. If anybody's interested in exploring if you were made for a purpose, like
Yeah.
we're having those conversations
Yeah.
around lunch on, on Wednesdays, if you want to come
Yeah.
join. So you give people agency
Yeah.
and you honor them, but there's ways for them to go deeper. And I
Yeah.
think the intentionality of that is, hey, if you never come to the opt-in things,
Mm-hmm.
I still love seeing you at happy hour. Like, I'm not going to stop being your
Yeah.
friend
Yeah.
because you didn't make this, you didn't take this deeper step.
Right.
But there's invitations for that deeper step. So
Yeah.
it's like inhabiting it with, with the heart and compassion of Jesus,
Yeah.
and just paying attention
Yeah.
and having the courage to create those spaces and make those
Yeah.
invitations and invite people to cross over those
Yeah. Yeah.
thresholds without changing um, the the heartbeat of the whole
Yeah.
group that may not be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's super helpful. Intentionality. Okay, here's my last question, and you can share a little bit about what you do as Fresh Expressions, perhaps as part of this. You've got a church, and they've been struggling for a long time, and they say, "We really like this, but we are so tired, and we've been struggling for so long. We don't know if we have the energy or the bandwidth to do something like this." What encouragement, what advice, what words would you give to a church like that?
Hmm. Oh, well, first I would say, pray, Lord, what would you have us do?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, I would also pray into that invitation that those who give their lives will receive it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know one congregation that really dug into the parables of the kingdom
Mm.
and studied that. Their leadership studied that. I often will, and this is not a plug for the book, but
Uh-huh.
taking opening space or something like that, and
Uh-huh.
just kind of uh, reading those chapters and having conversations with your leadership team sometimes
Uh-huh.
builds some energy because it builds some imagination,
Yeah.
and it helps you see that you don't have to do everything, but you
Yeah.
could try some little, just one little small experiment.
Yeah.
So I'd say that.
Yeah.
I would say look at what you're already doing.
Yeah.
And is there a way to really build on that? If you're
Yeah.
already doing a food pantry, begin to imagine what
Mm-hmm.
would it look like to form a new form of community right
Mm.
here among the volunteers and the guests of the food pantry.
Uh-huh.
Or where are some of your partnerships, or where do you sense like there's a, a loneliness or a longing for connection, or or a quality of communal life that
Yeah.
like that there's somebody's a few somebodies or your whole congregation might step into.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that
Yeah.
listening posture, and exploring what have you already got, and how do you
Yeah.
use it not just for yourselves, but begin to just give a little piece of who you are away for the sake of others and see what God will do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's good. Yeah, it's a journey, and it starts with just the little things, just the prayers and the openness. And I got to know, what's your dog's name behind
Oh,
you?
oh yeah. Chester came up and joined me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. My cat Gobi's walking around the room here too somewhere. So anyway, it looked like you had one other thing you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say what I was going to say is, you're not alone. Many
Yeah,
congregations are trying to
yeah,
figure this out. And part of the reason they're tired
yeah.
is there's just a lot they're trying to manage, and
Hmm.
keep going. And you feel it. You're like, we have less and less people, and we're still trying to keep things going. So what I would say is this is where the life is.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
this I have just watched over and over and over people be rekindled
Mm,
um, and re-energized
yeah,
in these spaces, and they don't have to be really
yeah,
expensive. And we
yeah.
have all kinds of resources. We put out a
Mm,
story a week on something that's
mm,
happening out there. We have prayer walking guides and coaches.
mm,
And this year we're going to be looking at kind of like ways different fresh expressions are forming in different
mhm.
spaces, and different communities. And we're going to do some dives there with people. And so we're just trying to give people more handles
Yeah,
to lower the fear factor,
yeah.
raise the encouragement factor,
Mhm.
and help people see that they really have the capacity. And surprisingly,
Mm,
if you just have two or three people
yeah,
who are willing to give it a go on the edge,
yeah,
God can do something amazing with that.
yeah.
You
That's
don't have to
awesome.
do a whole strategic plan.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And so, in order to get some of those resources and to find out more about the work that you're doing, where could people go?
Freshexpressions.com. You can
Okay.
find us there. You can find our resources there. You can reach out to me there, and the rest of our team. So yeah,
Yeah.
we
Awesome.
love to we love to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And thanks for a great conversation. And thanks. Yeah, just thanks for the really good work that you're doing. Appreciate you.
Hey, it's a joy. Thanks, Marcus, for the invitation.